the Kandid Shop. We speaking on things you not. Just press play and let it rock. Hey, welcome to the Kandid Shop. Whoa, welcome to the Kandid Shop. We speaking on things you not. Just press play and let it rock. Hey, welcome to the Kandid Shop. Oh, feel like we going through mad things. Gotta keep it real when they choose not. We gon' talk about it when the news drop. Welcome to the show where you know we don't fake this. Keep your opinion to yourself if it don't make sense.
Hey, Podcast Nation. It is your girl, Candidly Kristen, and this is the Kandid Shop, your number one destination for candid conversations. Today, we're going to have a candid chat about the uncomfortable but super important topic of death, dying, and end-of-life matters. Joining me for this very necessary discussion are death doula, end-of-life coach, grief tender, and founder of Flourish Collaborative, Jenni, and I forgot to ask you how to say your last name, Herchenbach, and RN MSN, hospice nurse, end-of-life educator, and co-founder of Sips and Wishes, Amy Hensley. Welcome, ladies, to the Kandid Shop.
Thanks, Kristen.
So nice to have you. Not the easiest conversation to be having, but I think it's a really necessary one because nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to talk about death and dying, but we are all going to come to the end of our time here. And so we need to have this conversation. So let's talk about it. Now, my kid, my son and daughter both know where my air quotes red folder is. And that has all of my insurance docs, my will, advance directives, final wishes for when I'm gone. But a lot of people do not. So I poked around Pew Institute to find some stats. So here are a few. 90% of people say that talking with their loved ones about end-of-life care is important, but only 27% actually have done so. 60% of people say that making sure their family is not burdened by tough decisions is extremely important, but 56 have not yet communicated their end-of-life wishes. And the most common reason among all respondents for not writing down wishes and values for end-of-life care were they're not sick or dying, it's depressing to think about, and they do not know how to go about creating a plan. So that's where this conversation comes in. But first, I have to ask each of you, when did you know that this work was what you were meant to do? Because honestly, it's not something most people will see as their calling. And I'm sorry, Amy, you can go first. When was it for you?
I would say probably 5 or 6 years ago, I started working with a coworker who was very comfortable talking and educating about end of life. And it was never something that I shied away from, but I didn't have a lot of experience professionally.
Okay.
And in the role that I was in as a teacher, it was very necessary to talk to my nursing students about end of life because they're all going to encounter patients who are dying, and I wanted them to be comfortable. So that just made me need to be more comfortable. And so it just came with practice and listening and educating myself and surrounding myself with people who were comfortable with the conversation. And it's just become something that I really don't have a problem talking about. And if anybody asks me, I'm willing to talk a lot about it. So I know not many people are, but I am one of them.
Good, because we need more. And Jenni, when was it for you?
I was always that kid that wanted to talk about death and didn't understand why I got strange looks from people when I would say things like, "Oh, she died," or "that person is dying," and adults would shush me or correct my language to make it more palatable. And I really didn't understand. And that lack of understanding has kind of followed me into adulthood. I still don't understand why we don't talk about this. It's the one thing we're all going to do. And so to me, it's just common sense that we would talk about it. But I know that I live in a society where that's not the case. So I got really comfortable with these conversations. I'm a occupational therapist,
Okay.
and I worked for many years in a trauma center. And you get really comfortable really quickly talking to people about how, even if there wasn't a death, a lot of times there was a change in their life that meant the life they knew yesterday is not the life they have now.
Mhm.
So nobody says, on a Sunday afternoon, I hope I end up in a trauma center today. So,
Right.
I never ever met a patient that was glad to be there.
Right.
But, occupational therapy and my work really prepared me to just sit with people in really tender, vulnerable, but uncomfortable times. And
Mhm.
I didn't realize that I was being prepared for this kind of work.
Right.
What happened for me was I actually took a break from my occupational therapy career because it's a very physical job. And I
Mhm.
started realizing I can't continue to do this until old age. Physically, it's going to be too demanding. And I took a break to see what else was out there option wise. And then the pandemic hit.
Hmm.
So that allowed me to, when the pandemic came to be, there was a density of death that
Mhm.
people had to talk about it. People were dying all around us. People had to talk about it. And then a program that was educating and certifying death doulas went online. So the
Okay.
pandemic allowed me to access, just a ton of information, a lot more education. And, I realized, oh, this is what I was made to do.
Right. That's awesome. So, ladies, let me ask you this. The uncomfortability about talking about death, dying, end of life matters. Do you think it is a cultural or societal thing? Like Americans are uncomfortable with it, but some cultures are not. What do you guys think?
I would say yes. I don't know that it's only Americans, but I
Hmm.
would probably. But even within, like Americans are made up of so many different, you know,
Hmm.
backgrounds that some Americans are fine with it. And it's just, I think it can be the culture of your family as well.
Right.
Because
Right.
my family was very open about it.
Yeah, I have found exactly what Amy's saying. The way people live tends to be the way they die, tends to be the way they talk about death. So I definitely have encountered families that live more multi-generationally. So you'll see, you know, multi-generation parents,
Right.
grandparents, great grandparents, all growing up in the same house.
Hmm.
And those microcultures tend to be much more open about talking about end of life because people are seeing it in real time in
Yeah.
their homes.
Yeah.
But there's definitely, I will say I just spent some time in Canada, and Canadians seem to be a little further along with this, which is interesting because ethnically they're very similar to Americans,
Hmm.
but their government actually pays for end of life services and death doula services, where in in the United States we are a long way from those services being
Right.
standard or covered by insurance.
Right. Agreed. So, Jenny, what exactly, I've been waiting to ask this question, is a death doula and grief tender, and what is it that you do?
I am so glad you asked because so the word doula it's an ancient word that means servant.
Mm.
And a lot of people are familiar with the concept of a birth doula. So
Yes.
people have gotten used to birth doulas being present during a birth,
Hmm.
and that birth doula's only responsibility is taking care of that birthing human. The person giving birth is their focus. They're not worried about if the dad's in the room, not worried about him. When the baby comes, not necessarily worried about the new human,
Right.
worried about that person giving birth. And I very much do that same kind of work as people leave this world. So instead of ushering people in, I'm helping people with their final curtain call and how they exit this world. And then the grief tender part of it is, when I started this work, I knew I was going to be doing end of life coaching, which is helping people make their plan, helping
Hmm.
people put down if a perfect plan could come to be, what would that look like? What would your death look like? And then also actually being present as people die.
Okay.
I knew I would be doing that. And I don't know why I didn't anticipate this, but a large part of what I do is really supporting people who are grieving.
Okay.
And it's just, I tend to grief the way that I tend my garden. I meet it where it is. I meet people where they are. When you're out in a garden, you can't rush the weather. You can't change the soil quickly. You can't rush those seeds into sprouting or flowering.
Right.
And that's really how I sit with people in grief. I meet them where they are, and I start to coach them through the process of letting light back in. Because as people are grieving, there's just a lot of darkness.
Yeah.
And so, encouraging people that we can feel, humans have the capacity to feel so many things simultaneously. So we can be in grief, in deep, desperate grief, and joy at the same time. And it's just a reminder to people that, I see you, I see that you're grieving, I see how you're suffering, but I also see how much joy is out there for you, and, inviting people kind of back into that.
Nice. So, Amy, how is that different from what you as an end-of-life educator do?
My goal is to help people have the conversations with their loved ones about end-of-life medical options. And
Okay.
not many people know or understand what the medical options are or what the side effects of those medical options are. Some of them will be presented with those medical options in a crisis situation, which isn't the best time to learn and make decisions.
Right.
So our goal with Sips and Wishes is to have these conversations and this educational material in a comfortable, relaxed environment, literally around your kitchen table or in front of your fireplace with a beverage and a snack. And we go through different body systems and teach about things like CPR or dialysis, just to name a couple. We thread through the whole party the concept of, what does living mean to you? Each individual person has a different answer for that.
Yeah.
And that answer can really guide what choices and what wishes you have for your end of life, whenever that might be, because we don't know when that day is coming. It could be in a traumatic car accident or a stroke or a boating accident, or it could be at a ripe old age.
Right.
But what we're finding is those older folks, our grandparents in their 80s and 90s, are still presented with some of those options, and then they don't know what to do because they think they should just because they can. And that's not always necessarily the best option for them.
Right.
So it's just really thinking about, what does living mean for you? And let's get you the education on what CPR is in real life so you can decide if that's for you or not.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Well, personally, I think I would want both of you. You know what I mean? Together would be like the ideal thing to have.
Yeah.
So, Jenni, what is the number one thing that people typically, and I know that everybody's different, typically and generally need or want from you as a death doula?
People just want to be heard and seen. I don't think human beings are any different at death than we are at life. I said it before, that people very much die the way that they live. So that's why I think it's so important that we start talking about, the way that I say it to people is, I want everyone to have the opportunity to pursue their good death, whatever that means. And that phrase, like I use those words together very purposefully. We pursue things that we want, and calling a death a good death kind of takes people off guard, because they'll be like, well, how can any death be a good death?
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me so sad because again, we're all going to do it. Why can't we do it well? Why can't we say, this is my plan, this is what I want, and darn it, I'm going out the best I can. So for what people want from me is candid conversation.
Mm-hmm.
They want honesty.
Mm-hmm.
They, some people want to make sure nothing is sugar-coated. Other people want everything sugar-coated. So I really just have to work with each client and figure out, what language is going to work for this client. But, I just open the possibility to people and ask them to get curious. If you could, get curious. What would your good death look like? Where would you be? Who would you be surrounded by? What would you look at? What would you be smelling? What would you not want to be smelling? I've never met anyone that says, please surround me by strangers in a bright hospital room with lots of beeping. Like no one has ever said, sign me up for that. But that's how the majority of us leave. The majority of us leave surrounded by strangers in a strange place.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
So,
that's exactly what I keep saying too, is like, just because we can doesn't mean we should, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, the more that we can talk about it, every single conversation about this has a little ripple outward. So each one is like a stone that we throw into that pond, and we don't necessarily know what happens next. But I really think that every conversation someone can hear where we can say, I am going to die. I don't know when, but I am going to die, and I want to do it on my terms.
Yeah.
I want it to be my choice who's in the room. I want to make sure that there are no lilies in the room because the scent of them makes me queasy. I want to make sure that, certain people are there and certain people are not,
Right.
Do not play me certain kinds of music. Make sure that it's rocking in that room.
Right.
Everyone has their own way of living. And by planning ahead, we can make sure that we die the same way.
Got it. And Amy, the same question to you. What are some of the top things that people need and want from you generally?
I would say for our audience, it's that opportunity to just have the conversation. Once we open up the floor to, ask anything you want, people really, the floodgates can sometimes open. People want the opportunity to talk and discuss and share what they want, what they have as their wishes with the people around them. Because so many times I'll have a couple and one will say to the other, oh, really? I didn't realize that was your wish, or I didn't realize that you felt that way about some stuff. And so it's just the opportunity to be as open as we can and start that conversation, because not many people know how to start those conversations when been married for 50, 60, 70 years. And what you say is, we never had the chance to talk about how we want to die. It's like, you've been together for 50, 60, 70 years.
Right.
What you been doing? I mean, the trouble.
What you been talking about?
Yeah, blows my mind. But yeah, our
Amy, I love that you bring that up, because I've had the exact same experience where families and couples are amazing at making assumptions. And I will even share a little story with you. I was guilty of making that assumption. So when I started this work, when I was in my training, one of my requirements was that I planned my own death. So I went through all the planning that I now do with other people. And the first thing is, where do you want to die? And I wrote down, I would love to die at home, but I know how uncomfortable that's going to make my family. And I believed that statement to be true. And so I thought, so hopefully I get a bed at the only hospice house in town. We live in Omaha. I live in Omaha, Nebraska. There's almost 1 million people in the metro area, we have one 26-bed hospice in town. It's ridiculous. It's not enough. But I thought maybe I'll get lucky and end up there. And then my husband, my assignment was go tell your husband or your spouse what you want. And I told him that. And he's like, no, I would actually be really upset. I'm upset that you would want to die anywhere else.
Right.
And I'm like, what? He's like, and I'm like, you wouldn't be uncomfortable with me dying at home? He's like, no, I think that'd be beautiful.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. And I thought, oh, what a beautiful example, slap in the face, that we can't assume. We cannot assume what other people want or need unless we have to have the conversations. And even if you had the conversation a year ago, a lot of things change over the course of a year. Like, I would love that couples and families would sit down once a year and have this discussion, like maybe not Thanksgiving, but pick another day. Pick another day and have it be the day that you talk about this stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Because like the other thing that people want from me is the stuff they didn't know they needed from me, which is that the explanations on what these medical interventions are in real life.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you right now, how you see CPR depicted on TV shows and in movies is not accurate.
Okay.
Nothing about what you are seeing on most TV shows is how it is in real life. And that is stunning to most people. And when I talk about the quote unquote success rate of CPR, they have to stop me and say, is that correct? Is that no you wrote down on this piece of paper that you handed me? And I said, it is. That's, the statistics of success on TV shows is about 80 to 90% because you can't have 100%. You just have to have a little bit of drama.
Right.
But when they find out in real life that it's about 12%, they believe me. And they're like, well, what about, we have all these AEDs out here now. Isn't that number higher? And I said, 12% is up from 7% before we had all these AEDs out here. So and you have to figure out what success means to you, because success could just mean your heart is going again.
Right.
It doesn't talk about, are you intubated? Are all of your ribs broken and now you're on pain meds because you can't take a deep breath? Are you getting pneumonia? Or do you have a anoxic brain injury? And we talk about all these things in real, very simple terms for layman's. I'm a nurse, but I'm used to educating people who aren't nurses, who have no background in medicine. And we explain things just in normal terms. And it's really eye-opening for a lot of people. And that's where they didn't know that they needed me to explain this to them.
So Amy, I'm sorry, Jenni, since Amy was talking about it, tips and wishes. How does that work? Do you come, or you and your co-founder or another end-of-life educator come into somebody's space, or do you do it virtually, or you meet somewhere? Like, I thought the concept was awesome.
Thank you. Right now, I live in Lincoln, Nebraska, so just about an hour from where Jenni is.
Okay.
We do in-person parties right now, and call them parties because it's way more fun than calling it a class.
Right.
Come into people's spaces wherever, like, as if that's their home or a community center or a church. And we hold the parties there. We have beverages and snacks, and it's very interactive. We have a curriculum that Aaron and I developed. The smaller parties, I can manage those on my own. We have up to 12 people at the smaller parties. The larger parties are up to 20, and we both generally go to that because we're using a lot of emotional intelligence while we're doing this.
Okay.
Because it is such a sensitive topic for a lot of people. We're really watching the participants and listening to what they're saying and trying to answer all the questions. And we take breaks when we need them because some of this is pretty heavy stuff and everybody's got different life experiences. And like, for example, we had one gal who really needed a break after the CPR discussion because she had recently been through a scenario where she gave CPR to her husband.
Mm.
And we needed to take that break and just kind of catch our breath. And I talked to her at the side and, to see how I could support her. And so when we, like I said, we have these bigger parties, we both are there to make sure everybody's comfortable and
Right.
as comfortable as they can be. We understand these are uncomfortable conversations, and we are both comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations, but it's really a matter of helping guide and answer questions and moving somebody just even one notch more comfortable
Mhm.
with the conversations, because that really is our goal, is just to make everybody a little more comfortable with it. Because like Jenni and I have both said, our society just doesn't want to talk about it or think about it. And we're superstitious. And if we talk about it, it's going to happen. And
Right.
it doesn't work like that. But people are,
Yeah.
nurses are as superstitious as anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jenni, your Flourish Collaborative, love that name too, by the way. Why did you start it, and what is it exactly that you do within it?
Yeah, another great question. So Flourish Collaborative, I didn't want to give my company a name that sounded somber or serious or sad. I really think that we can flourish as humans all the way through our death. And then the collaborative part is something I'm really passionate about because I can't do it all. So, collaborating with people like Amy and with other people in my small town neighborhood and in the whole world, thanks to the internet,
Mhm.
it's just great to, constantly learn from others. But what my company does, is threefold. I do provide, bedside services for people who are dying, where I actually accompany and accommodate them through the active dying process. I also do end of life coaching, which is done. Ideally, it would be done with people who are not imminently dying, not
Mhm.
terminally ill. You know, it really can be done at any age, where we just get curious about what would your good death look like? If you could
Mhm.
plan it and we could script it, what would it be? And then as those clients actually approach death, it's one of those things where we say, okay, here's the perfect scenario, and we're going to get as close to it as we can. Because the reality is, just like when you make a birth plan, it doesn't always go to plan,
Right.
but we try to keep things as close to it as possible. And then that third leg of my little tripod stool of services is the grief work, supporting people in grief. And that can be any type of grief. My experience has been that people want to quantify the level of their grief, and that keeps people from sharing that they're grieving. So people will say things like, well, it's not like anyone died.
Sure.
I'm just grieving the loss of a job. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, that seems pretty big to me.
Right.
But I think humans tend to downplay their feelings, especially when it comes to grief. If you look at the bereavement, benefits that we offer employees, it
Sure.
shows you
Yeah.
how little we care that people are
Right.
grieving. It's like, oh, your spouse died. See you in 3 days.
Right.
And I hope you plan to be back at full capacity. And the reality is that's just not reality. So
No.
we have people coming back into the workforce after a death, and people don't know what to say to you. So they stay quiet. They don't want to upset you because, you might remember someone died. Like, like people act, like maybe you had forgotten and they reminded you. So, we live in these very strange bubbles where we spend most of our time with the people that we work with, but a lot of those conversations are truly just those water fountain conversations that are so, how's the weather?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Right.
But my goal is to eventually roll out services to corporations and small companies so that grief support is an employee benefit.
Yeah.
Because if we could support people in their grief in the place where they work, they would never look for work anywhere else if
Yeah.
they felt loved and supported at the times that they're, the most vulnerable. So just teaching people how to have those conversations. People will say, what do I say? What do I say? Say something.
Right.
Even if you say, Amy, I heard that your dad died. I don't know what to say. And I'm really worried that I'm going to say something that might upset you. So I'm tiptoeing in here and I just want you to know that I'm thinking about you.
Mm-hmm.
And I might say the wrong thing, but I heard from a death doula that I should say something. So I'm saying something because I
Right.
really love you. And then
Right.
people always ask, like, well, what question can you ask? My favorite question to ask people is, Amy, I heard your dad died. Tell me about your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And just leave it there. That way it's not, maybe Amy and her dad didn't get along.
Right.
Maybe saying, I'm so sorry for your loss feels really ingenuine to her.
Mm-hmm.
That gives her the opportunity to say what is on her heart. And it just creates this beautiful connection where there's just no expectation in it. It doesn't feel, ingenuine. It's just a genuine question of like,
Yeah.
I heard this happened. Tell me about this person.
Right. Okay. So what would each of you say to someone who might hear this, who has long avoided any discussions about death, dying, end of life matters, but might be ready to start now? What would you say to that person? And Amy, you can go first.
Yeah, for me, I would say you're doing this for your loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
You are helping by preparing, by educating, by having the conversations, and hopefully by documenting.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're doing is you're giving a gift to your loved ones. We do a lot of pre-planning in our culture,
Mm-hmm.
and lots of people even pre-plan their funeral, which is fantastic. That
Right.
takes the burden off of family from having to make some of these details. And oh gosh, what songs would mom want at her
Right.
funeral? Should we get the blue or the white or whatever? And the same is true with this. There's Aaron and I have seen so many times when the grief is so complicated by trauma and guilt because family members are having to guess and make decisions
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't have the conversations. Instead of just having the conversations, you share your wishes. And then your medical power of attorney is just being your advocate. They're being your voice. They've already gotten from you what your wishes are, and they're just being able to voice them. And so giving this gift to your loved ones is beautiful and calming and helps your loved ones manage their grief and not have it be complicated by that guilt.
Yeah. Now, Amy, before I let Jenny give her answer to that same question, what are the documents that people should have, like the absolute and then some optionals that they should
Okay,
have
so
in their folder?
yeah, I would say the absolute is to have a medical power of attorney
Okay.
who can be your voice when your voice no longer works. It only starts when you are not able to advocate for yourself.
Okay.
It could be a mental incapacity or a physical one.
Got it.
It doesn't have to be a relative. It just needs to be somebody that you trust and that you've had the conversation with.
Okay.
But documenting that helps everybody. It helps your loved ones. It helps your family. It helps the medical providers
Mm-hmm.
because there's one person that you have trusted to be your voice.
Got it.
A good thing to have would be a living will.
Okay.
And that spells out in as much detail as you want it to about what medical interventions you do or don't want. And there's several ways to do that. And all of these things are called advanced directives. You are just directing what your care is in advance.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Is a
Yeah.
is a lot of people, I work at a senior building, ironically. Everybody there is between 62 minimum, and I have somebody that's 92. And they all have power of attorneys. But what
Okay.
I don't think that a lot of them understand is that power of attorney ends when you die. And so when I'm trying to ask them, where should I send a security deposit or this, that, and the other, there's no executor. They don't have a will. So
Okay.
everything is kind of in limbo. So power of attorneys are good when you're living, but I'm pretty sure they end when you die. And medical power of attorney is completely different. And so I'm understanding now.
Correct. Yeah.
But having a will, people are always like, but my building is for low and moderate income. So they all think that they don't need a will because they don't have anything.
Right.
And
Yeah. And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak to all of the intricacies and the details. And I'm sure that laws change from state to state.
right.
But yes, there are different kinds of power of attorney that you can have. You can have a financial only. You can have a medical only. You can have just one power of attorney that's over everything.
Mhm.
You
Right.
should have multiple power of attorneys, not only just for, like, for example, you should have a primary financial power of attorney and a secondary financial power of attorney. You should do the same thing for medical, have a primary and then a secondary, not
Mhm.
equal 50-50. You should have one designated and then like a backup.
Right.
But yeah, I'm sorry, I can't speak to what all the details are as far as like when stuff goes into effect for the
Right.
financial wills and all that stuff. I just mostly know about the medical stuff.
Got it. But that's important too, because
Yes, I would say yes.
yes.
Out of my wheelhouse, but definitely important.
Okay. And Jenni, what would you say to someone who's listening, who is ready to have this uncomfortable conversation? What would you say to that person?
Just start small. Start with one trusted friend or family member and just start small. Get comfortable with the conversation.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be a 3-hour conversation the first
Right.
time. This doesn't have to be stressful.
Right.
I love to challenge people, and I'll challenge your audience. Tell one person where you want to die. If
Mhm.
you get to choose, where is it going to be? And then ask them to answer the same question. And hopefully that just gets the conversation rolling. I also love to challenge people to have this conversation with someone who's young.
Mm.
Children are incredibly gifted at speaking about these things. And I think society like pushes it out of them as we get older. Like
Yeah.
children are remarkably able to talk about these hard things.
Mhm.
They can talk about death. They can talk about dying. They can talk about what they want, and they do it without any fear.
Mhm.
So the more that we can encourage young people to start having these conversations, the less we'll have to reprogram ourselves as adults that it's okay to talk about these things.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would
Agreed.
100% agree with that part, Jenny, because I was, as my hospice nurse role was going on last weekend, I had a patient in the dying phase, and family was gathered, and there were several children between the age of, I would say, 3 and 8. And they were
Mm.
just so curious and open and wanted to ask me questions. And can I touch my loved one's hand,
Mhm.
and all these things. And so many of the grown-ups were crying, and why is everybody crying? And so it was just, I asked permission to the mom that's sitting across the room. I said, is it okay that I'm talking to the children like this? And she said, absolutely. And so it was just so fun. And I know that sounds weird, but it was
Right.
to talk to them in a way that made them comfortable and answered their questions just honestly and age appropriate. And
Mhm.
they were kind of matter of fact about it. And then
Yeah.
they left the room and went to the playroom, and then they came
Right.
and that again, and it was just wonderful. And I think that Jenni, I totally agree that if we can keep them tuned into this and not have to reprogram later, beautiful. Love it.
Yep.
Yeah, I love what you just said. Children, I bet the children in that room helped the adults in the room. Because
Absolutely.
I know the adults in the room had the same questions for you, Amy. Like,
Probably.
can I touch your here? What does this cord wire thing do?
Right.
Kids are the best. And
Yep.
they ask the coolest questions, and they just also sometimes you over explain and you realize, oh, they just wanted a very simple answer,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then they're like, okay, cool. And off they go. It's just,
Right.
it's, if we can make death just a part of the conversation about life, it just makes it that much easier.
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, ladies, this has been a long time coming, but so worth the wait. Can you each just give me your last thoughts on death and end of life matters, and then how my listeners can connect with you and your organizations should they want to? And Amy, you can go first.
Okay. I would say take the time to educate yourself on what these medical interventions are, no matter how that comes to you. And just get the basic facts, because that will help you decide if it's something you want or not. And if you keep in mind what your definition of living is, that will really help guide you. And to get a hold of me, we have a website, sipsandwishesparty.com. And we have a Facebook page, ironically called Sips and Wishes. The phone number is on there. Our email is on there, sipsandwishes@gmail.com. I love to talk about this and would love to see if there's a way we can get to a party at your house.
Nice. And Jenni?
Yeah, what I would say to your listeners is, just start the conversations as small as they can be, and reach out to someone like Amy or I, because I think people don't know what they don't know. That's like the key here is most people don't even know what questions to ask. So just by starting the conversation, by getting in touch with someone who has a little more experience, you can really start the process of pursuing your own good death and encouraging the people around you to do the same. As far as getting a hold of me, I work with clients all over the world thanks to Zoom. So my website is flourishcollab.com. So flourish, COLLAB.com. I am on Facebook, and my email address and all my contact information is on the website. I do free consultation, get acquainted calls. So if anyone would like to talk to me more, they can certainly book a curiosity call, and I look forward to that.
Thank you so much. Thank both of you. Thank you, first off, for your time, your patience, and your observations, your expertise, your warmth and authenticity. Thank you for all of it. This has been just absolutely everything that I thought it would be and more. So thank you for joining me.
Kristen, thank you.
Oh,
for
it was so fun.
Yeah, thank you for opening the door for this conversation. I know that you do a lot of different kinds of conversations, and thank you for recognizing that this is really an important one for everybody.
Yes, it is. It definitely is. So listen, guys, both Amy and Jenni's contact info, their websites, any of their social links will be in the show notes, so with clickable links. So you can just go to the show notes. There'll be key takeaways in there, and you can connect with either of them or both of them. I suggest both. That would be my personal suggestion, because while what they do is similar, it is different. And I think both pieces are needed so that the conversation around death, dying, and end of life care can be complete. So
Very
don't
well
forget to
said.
thank you. Thank you.
Close enough.
I didn't, that was off the top of my head. I didn't have that in my little notes, but
You understood the assignment, Kristen.
I understood the assignment.
She did.
This has been a great conversation. So guys, don't forget to visit my website. I have to shamelessly plug my own stuff at www.thekandidshop.com, Candid with a K. Listen to an episode or 4, drop me a review, share the show with your friends. And as always, I want everyone listening to keep it safe, keep it healthy, and keep it candid.